Hey folks, I'm Andrea and this is the Capitalism for Good podcast. This is 100 interviews of business leaders making a positive impact on their community. I am not a professional podcaster. I am not a seasoned creator, but I am a small business owner looking to learn from other business owners who are making against the grain decisions to leverage the ways in which we make and spend our money in order to support our community. There are links to the people and the places that we reference and talk to within the show notes, and also the company mentions page that is also linked within the show notes. There's an ad-free version as well as an exclusive between the interview series at patreon.com/capitalismforgood. You can also follow the podcast and the sister projects, Bittersweet Paradox and Capitalism for Green, on social media. And then, as always, I would love to hear your thoughts about this conversation and all of the conversations that we have. So please share your thoughts, your recommendations, and especially share with me all of the good that you see out in the community. I love it so much, and I think that it is really impactful to continue to talk about the people that we see out there in the world innovating and pushing the industries and pushing our society toward a better direction, given the things that we have available at our fingertips. Folks, today we have Amy Welsman. She is the founder of a company called Paume that is really innovating and changing the industry when it comes to hand care in the way that we look at hand care, including all of the intentional and complicated decisions that go into it. And I loved this conversation with Amy so much. We talk about so many different kinds of things. I found out about Amy in episode 32 of the Capitalism for Good podcast when we were interviewing Stacey Grace. She is the co-founder and CEO of Kent, an organic basics underwear t-shirt company, and her shout out was to Amy. So of course I had to reach out to her and was, digging into her websites and the socials and the background and all of the things. And once again, exactly like what happens with all of these other leaders that we talk to, like it starts with a teeny breadcrumb, and then the more that I find out, the more excited I am to talk to these people. And then also there are just even more things that are uncovered, and then I get to the point where I'm talking to them and there's just like an explosion of ideas and pathways and rabbit holes and things that we could have gone down, because these, no surprise here, these people are really freaking interesting. And that happens here again with Amy as well. She is personable, she is relatable, she is inspiring, and she is just like down to earth. And we kind of get into this a little bit about like her personal take on slow intentional growth in comparison to these impulsive decisions, and how that actually counterintuitively maybe relates to her ability to kind of like chase and innovate and take on all of these very different kinds of projects within her career and within her life, and how all of those things happen. We talk about the life of a founder and the things that she is doing and incorporating within her kind of day-to-day space to maintain sanity and stability. We talk about sustainability in both like an environmental packaging product development kind of way, but we also talk about sustainability in terms of like fiscal sustainability and growth and scale in a way that is intentional and makes sense. We also talk about sustainability in terms of like the people behind it and like how to kind of combat burnout and to be able to keep yourself going when you're on this pathway to, as she is, to create this legacy brand that she has in mind. I mean, we talk about the logistics of incorporating give backs into the business model and how that all works together. We talk about also like the leadership philosophy and how important it is to develop a team and what that looks like within her world. And she herself talks about how she has not had a single employee on her team quit within the 5 years that they've been in existence. And that is truly remarkable. And I think that is kind of leading into something that we can all kind of learn from, and also kind of just the care and intentionality of those decisions from the back end, from a consumer perspective. I'm telling you, we are all over the place. We tackle so many things. And I personally left this conversation with Amy feeling energized and inspired and hopeful and excited. And I just am excited and hopeful that that will be the same experience for you as well after you listen to her. So enjoy.
It's a bit of a zigzag story. I started my career in advertising when I left university. Well, if I go like really far back, I really wanted to be in publishing. I wanted to work in like fashion journalism. I was one of those classic millennials. Very predictable, wanted to like go work in a fashion magazine. And then as I, interned there for a while, kind of realized that the industry was changing a lot. And, I actually worked at a magazine that ended up folding while I was there. And then I, was only like 22 years old. So quickly picked up my socks and went into advertising. And I worked at JWT in Toronto, worked on the Johnson & Johnson account. So that was my first experience, really like being exposed to CPG, learning how the whole marketing machine worked. And it was wonderful. I loved it. I was there for 3 years. And then by sort of a weird twist of fate, I met this woman. Her name was Joanna Griffiths, who graduated from her master's program at Fontainebleau at the business school at INSEAD. And she had won the entrepreneurship award or contest, I should say, for her idea to basically like revolutionize women's underwear. Her whole idea was making like functional, beautiful underwear that looked good on every body type, that was like the anti-Victoria's Secret underwear that worked for your body as well as looked great. And I was really inspired by her idea and basically pitched myself to her as her first hire and was like, I'm really passionate about what you're doing and I want to join your team. And I left advertising to join Nix, which is now known as Nix today. And it was my first real experience in the entrepreneurial world. Like I went from very big corporate, a lot of layers of people and teams and stakeholders to basically being a team of two and some interns. And I got to also witness and experience what it was like to bring an idea from ideation to through
Yeah.
design and then bring it to life and sell it. And I was there for 4 years building that business with her. And I wore many, many hats and learned just so much from that experience. And Joanna today remains like a close, I guess, a mentor and investor in Paume. And anyway, it was one of those real life-changing experiences that also led me to my next venture. I did take some time off when I left after 4 years. I consulted. I knew I wanted to launch a business of my own. I just didn't really know what the idea was. So I dabbled in a bunch of things, to be honest. And then when I became a mother in 2019, that was when the idea for Paume came to me. I was using hand sanitizer a lot throughout my day. Just I had like a difficult or challenging postpartum experience with my new baby. And I was just looking for like the easiest ways to clean my hands and just survive throughout the day. And I just recognized that the hand sanitizer category was really stagnant and really based on utilitarian products you could buy at like a gas station that, smelled terrible and was bad for your skin and packaged in really unappealing packaging. And I thought, maybe we could make a beauty product out of this. Like, something we should be doing every day, cleaning our hands, killing germs. And this was before the pandemic, right? So this was like kind of a bit of a novel concept. I imagined this really beautiful, sustainably packaged, design-driven product that had this formula that smelled good and felt good on our skin. And that was the idea. And then really it was sort of like 6 months of humming and hawing, putting together a business plan, not quite sure what to do. And then the pandemic hit. And that was the real push to jump me off, to jump off the cliff. So fast forward 5 years and we are now broadened from hand hygiene. That was, our original focus, but we've since then broadened into hand care in general, which I think is also a category that lacks innovation, lacks like a true voice, lacks a brand really that's saying like we are the definitive hand care brand.
Yeah.
It's usually a product that's like an afterthought for a body care brand, or it's often driven by fragrance companies that make hand creams based on fragrance, which, there's definitely a huge market for that. But I think typically the ingredients are not, it's not about the ingredient story, it's about the fragrance story. And we're trying to combine both, but really focus on ingredients first as like, what is this hand cream going to do for you? Is it just going to, hydrate you lightly for a few moments, or is it going to deliver that like long lasting benefit? Is it going to help with age spots? Is it going to help with skin tone and texture? What are like the idea of treating your hands like we treat our face, which I think these days millennials and everyone really is taking advantage of all the dermatological advances, and we're all looking really great. I'm actually like turning 40 this year, so I'm like, I'm starting, what can I do? What are all the things I can do? But the
Yeah.
point is I think we often look down at our hands and we've neglected them for a really long time, and we see that contrast. And we're trying to basically say, like, if you just adopt like a skincare routine for your hands, like you would your face, they'll keep up. And not to mention all the other ailments, that people experience with their hands, like severe dehydration and scaly skin and eczema and like all these other things that are just like part of our everyday. But there's also the aging story too. So we're trying to like address all those needs in a very simple daily routine for your hands.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like developing the product in the sustainable packaging and finding manufacturers and all of the different kind of intentional decisions that went into making your products and trying to keep kind of your values at the center when you're naturally kind of going against the grain? Like we've talked to all of
Mhm.
these founders and business leaders that specifically in sustainably manufactured goods, the advantage is you have a new and novel idea that you're going in a different direction. You're creating a product in a different way, but also the challenge is you're creating a product in a different way where the systems aren't always necessarily set up for that. What was your experience on that end of it?
You're exactly right. You are going against the grain a bit, though I would say that now there have been a lot of advances in
Mm,
packaging, even more obviously. Even 5 years ago, it was hard. But I think the biggest challenge for us was that we launched when the pandemic hit, and suddenly it was like we have this idea, it could be huge. Like we got to
mhm.
get this to market as quickly as possible, and that was really hard to balance against my real desire to stay true to our like core mission, because there were so many corners that we could have cut just to
Yeah.
get to market. Like it was actually pretty easy to make a hand sanitizer during that period. Like FDA and Health Canada were accelerating. All the regulatory stuff was really easy. We could have pretty easily like packaged and souped up. I could have gotten an off the shelf sanitizer, honestly, from any
Right.
tons of manufacturers that said we have these private label options. And that could have been a short term big win if we'd gotten to market sooner. But we really did take the time to stay true to our initial mission and idea. So speaking to that, it's, the formulation, which did take a long time initially to develop. We knew we wanted to get the scent just right. We knew we wanted to get the consistency. The emollient that we picked is not in any other hand sanitizer. So there was some like stability work that had to go into it and a lot of like R&D. And then on the packaging side, yes, I mean, there were fewer options for sure. We really explored a lot though. For a while it was like, do we go plastic free? What are our options? And after exploring all of them, it just made most sense for the formula, for the use, we did a huge kind of assessment. It's like, okay, we're going to go plastic, but we're going to use PCR. So we're going to use previously recycled materials. We're going to try to make everything as refillable. So we're going to use certain bags that use way less plastic than, say, like a bottle refill. So we were very intentional about our packaging choices. And yes, they took longer. It was more of a thought process. It was definitely something. It took us, a year basically to get the product ready to sell. And it could have taken a lot faster, I think, if we had just cut all those corners. But obviously I'm glad we didn't. And I knew even before we launched, I was like, I don't want to be associated with the pandemic. Like that's not what I'm doing here. I'm trying to create a legacy brand, stay true to the idea that I had before all this craziness happened. So I really had to take that long-term vision as we were in development.
The story around refillable packaging or even just like intentional packaging has been something that is on the forefront of my mind. Where do retailers or sustainably manufactured goods fit into the story of
Mhm.
clearly we want to like push the industry in a way in which we think will be less harmful and provide additional options. But also, there are some natural hurdles. And so, one of the things that comes often with customers is often refillable packaging is still plastic. Like you mentioned, you're still going with the
Mhm.
plastic that is refillable, but the idea that it is in some kind of a closed loop system or the type of material is pulling waste out of a dead end use kind of system is important and that is still pushing us forward. And I wonder from your perspective as someone who's also a leader in the industry and again, kind of a trailblazer in your own way, like how do you kind of view that role in being able to offer refillable packaging and make these types of choices? I mean, we could even go into talking about like your partnership with
Yeah,
Repurpose
repurpose.
Global
Yeah.
and like all of these types of things. Like what has been your experience and your take on your end there?
I think it's a delicate balance. I think sustainability or approach to packaging has always been like one of our pillars. It's certainly not at the forefront. And I always say
Mm,
that because we're not perfect at all. And no brand really is, honestly. There are a lot of misconceptions out there too around recyclability, around closed loop supply chains, around also like carbon footprint of materials that are perceived as more environmentally friendly, like
totally.
aluminum, for example, things that are like bigger, heavier to ship. Like the thing about plastic is, yes, it fills up our landfills, and when it's used in very limited cases and then thrown away, it's really not good. However, like the carbon footprint it requires to make it is much lower. It can be smaller to ship. Like there's a lot of different ways of looking at of assessing like this the quote unquote like eco-friendliness of packaging. So I learned a lot there. Also like a lot of materials that aren't actually recyclable when they say that they are, but you have to actually drop them off at a special bin. And like it's there's just a lot of like greenwashing and misconception. So I've never kind of said like we are sustainability first or we are
Mm,
like we just it's impossible to make a product. The reality is possible to make a product in this world without having an impact. For us, it's always been about what can we do that fits our design mission, that fits like the product experience? What can we do that's our absolute best? And Repurpose Global is like a great example of a way that we've kind of layered that in to our strategy, which is like a give back partnership with them where a percentage of sales goes toward basically like a community partnership. They have all these communities around the world that they support, and we're in Indonesia. There's a community in Indonesia and our money that's being donated is helping their cleanup efforts. Plastic on their beaches, plastic in their environment, and then they're then recycled or reused. And we're helping fund that. So it's an added layer of saying we can be quote unquote plastic neutral, meaning like for every, piece of a tube that we put into the environment, one is removed. And I think it's an important layer to our strategy. Again, we're not perfect. I never claim to be, but we're just like we're trying to do our best and we're trying to keep up with the innovations as well in packaging. And I think if every brand just like gave up because they weren't perfect, then we would
mm,
be in a way worse situation. Whereas if every brand is like, okay, we're just going to try to do small steps, even like simple things, I mentioned this a bunch, but like simple things like in your fulfillment SOPs, like using plastic tape versus water-based, like paper-based tape. We do stuff like that. It's like these simple changes can have a huge impact. We're also focused on the product itself. But
right.
think of the number of boxes with tape on them that we ship out a year. Like if you saw if you could roll all that tape and plastic tape into one thing on an annual basis, I think you'd be shocked at how much tape is being used. There's things like that in your supply chain that you could impact too. And it's our responsibility, I think, as brands to just be mindful of those things. And yes, to your point, it's going against the grain. It's often more expensive, I will say. When you're using previously recycled plastic in your packaging, you're pretty much paying double or triple what the virgin plastic version would be. So you have to either decide I'm going to make that compromise and I'm just going to decide for the good of the brand that we're going to use virgin plastic, or we're going to say, you know what, we can't do that. And like
Mm,
we've often say no just because we want to stay true to that. But I feel just like a responsibility, I think, to
yeah.
just do our best and strive for better. And as innovation also happens, like to kind of jump on board and support that innovation in packaging. Because again, if brands are showing complacency, there won't be any need or drive to evolve. But if everyone's asking those questions, trying to like demand that of their suppliers, like change will happen.
At what point did you start incorporating that partnership with Repurpose Global? Was it from the get-go, or was it something that you kind of had to wait until you were a little more stable to be able to be like, okay, now we can do that give back?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was out of the gate that we partnered with them.
Do you remember if you had any qualms or hesitation about being a brand new business and a brand new brand and automatically incorporating some kind of a give back. Like numbers are already tight. You're already kind of looking at your profit margins and trying to figure out
Oh yeah.
what that looks like there. It is a risk. And so many consultants or business leaders will tell you, like, make sure that you have income before you start pushing anything out
Yeah,
the door
probably would have
like
been much
that.
smarter. Yeah, building it into your margins out of the gate. And we did do that. I think, again, all of these decisions that you make when it comes to your approach to packaging, supply chain, give back, marketing, I mean, it's all a consideration. And like you either have to say, you know what, we're just gonna keep a tight lid. We're gonna not do these things because we just can't afford to do it, or you just go for it out of the gate. I think for us, it was just always woven into our approach.
Mm,
And it took us a long time to be a profitable business. Like, I
yeah.
won't lie there, you know. I think there were probably many decisions I made in the early days that were not right from like a business perspective necessarily, but perhaps from a brand perspective, from a community building perspective, from like a long-term planning perspective, were good. But you just have to make all those compromises along the way, and you're hit with them every day. This is one facet of it, but there's a lot of these kind of decisions that you're constantly faced with.
Do you think that part of your mentality on those types of decisions is shaped by that jump from CPG brands to a startup and like seeing it from square one? And so your take on risk is a little different?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's just such a massive difference between like J and J and and us. I mean,
Yeah, talk more about that.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it was a very long time ago. We can't speak too much detail, but I think the biggest thing is, we're such a small and nimble team. We can make decisions so quickly. We have the power of like flexibility, and I think a lot of brands launching now, this expectation of like hiring big teams early on is so gone, especially now with the
Mm,
pressure on brands to be profitable. I think there was a time where you could go out and do a Series A, raise $5 to $10 million and go hire a team of 80, even then when your P&L didn't call for it. And it didn't matter that you were losing money. Whereas I think now, like we can be the benefit of launching more recently is that we can use new like AI tools, for example, or we
mm,
can just, I think there's just ways of being a lot more lean. Whereas, working for a huge corporation, it's hard to go from thousands of employees to hundreds, like that's
yeah.
not something that happens overnight. Whereas in our case, like we've been able to stay really lean. Like we're a team of 6 people, and based on our revenue, like that's considered pretty lean. And we obviously have floaters and people, consultants who help us significantly. But I think that's probably the main difference is just the flexibility and being able to make these kind of decisions and assess without like 100 stakeholders, which is never easy. We can just kind of act a little more impulsively as a team. So,
Stacey Grace, the co-founder and CEO of Kent, gave you a shout out. I have found the sustainably manufactured goods community to be incredibly supportive of one another, especially in comparison to like a competitive nature of some of those other big brands. And I'm curious, especially because you've been in both worlds, what your take has been on it.
well, I mean, it's again like it was such a long, because I spent like 5 years at Nick's after working there. Like I was like
Yeah.
in my 20s when I worked, and I wasn't in J&J, I was an agency partner. So I shouldn't speak like I to things I do not know of. But yeah, I think there's a strong community of brands that are trying to be as sustainable as they can be. But I also think that it really depends on what your goals are as a founder. I think
Mm,
like there are a lot of people that are very comfortable with creating small, less of a footprint. They can afford to take those decisions that are perhaps more sustainable. I think no matter what, as I kind of were referring to before, if you're making product at a mass scale, like you're having an impact. And I
yeah.
think, you kind of have to like grapple and accept that. I think for me personally, like I have high ambitions for this brand. Like I want to build a legacy brand. Like I want to sell it in thousands of retail doors. Like I want to be a big brand. So, as I spoke to earlier, we're trying to do our best in every way we possibly can. But there are growth limitations, I would say. If you
Mm,
prioritize purely sustainability as your main mission, there are going to be limitations on your growth. I
yeah.
think there are probably some exceptions out there, like probably like Blue Land would be an exception for sure. Like there are certain categories, I think, where that's not the case. But I think
Yeah.
in beauty and consumable goods, it's kind of the case. I have to say.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the folks that we talked to a few months ago is Anastasia, the founder of Minori Beauty, and
Yeah,
that's one of the
I
things that
love her. I love her.
she's so great, and she's
Yeah.
so like just reasonable and down to earth. And one of the things that she was talking about, which kind of reminds me of what you're hitting on, I think, is like she was talking about trying to find packaging and like the evolution of packaging for Minori, and using the example of the lip gloss tube. And
Mm.
obviously, she's got sustainability in mind. She's wanting to go for glass. And so she's asking folks about it. Like, what would that look like? Can we do it? And at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense. It's not able to be recycled with the way that like the recycle machines and everything are set
Yeah.
up. The impact on transport is too
Yeah.
high.
Glass
And
is
it,
really heavy. Like
yeah,
it's, yeah.
and she's like, it doesn't make sense. So we land in plastic, and then that keeps her out of certain stores. But the story behind it is so much bigger than just, is it made of glass or is it made of plastic? Because there's so much kind of complication within our world there. And
Mhm.
it's like, but we shouldn't just say, like, don't buy Minori, don't buy Palm because they're using plastic, because there is so
Yeah.
much intention in the decisions there. And I
Yes.
think that that's
You make a good
important.
point. It's true. It's like it's a very black and white. And that's why even for me, like I never say that we're like sustainability first. Like I just don't because like there I don't want to be perceived as greenwashing, but also there is a real black and white mentality out there of like you're either plastic free and you're all in and you're like all or nothing, or you're just bad.
Right.
And I think that there are a lot of cases of brands who are in between, who are just like realistic, who have lots of different priorities and different facets to their mission. Like for us too, like design is something that's like very important to us. It's like what sets us apart, how the tube feels in your hand, like how
Mm,
things are applied. And like I didn't want to compromise that as well on like to do aluminum. It means like all my packaging is going to be silver or like, like there's so
right.
much, obviously there's coatings and stuff. But again, as soon as you add coatings, it totally compromises recyclability and like anyway so like anyway, there's just so many considerations and so many things you think about as a founder, and like we can't be perfect, but that is one thing I find challenging in an environment of very black and white. And there are those retailers out there who will say like, yeah, like you're cut from that
Right.
because of this product. And it's like, oh, I mean, this is what it's doing, I think, is just discouraging people from trying at all, is what's happening. And then a lot of brands, mass brands, are just like, well, screw it. Like people don't care. It's cheaper. The bottom line's better. Let's just like go and not think about it at all. And I think that's not a good thing either. So
Okay, that's a really good point. I want to talk a little bit more about like innovation, especially within the industry, but in the context of like an internal lens of your team and the folks that you're building. And it sounds like the goal is a legacy brand that is around. This isn't a trend. This isn't something that is just going to be kind of like a flashbang. Like
yeah.
this is something that will stand the test of time. And so, as you're thinking about building a team that is cohesive, that is stable, that is really kind of driving how everything is functioning, what's your philosophy on leadership and team building and mentoring and choosing the people that are working with you and all of those kinds of things internally?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the hardest. I think that's probably the hardest thing as a founder is like building a team and finding people that you trust, like the balance, like caring enough in the brand and its success, with also knowing that they're probably, perhaps taking a pay cut or, you never know,
Mm,
especially in the early days. Yeah, I would say, and you're never going to find people that care as much as you. It's really hard. Those people like, do
yeah.
exist, but they're unicorns. Yeah, I mean, I've been really fortunate with my team. I haven't had anyone quit or leave. I haven't had to let anyone go in 5 years. I know I knock all the wood. I've been slowly just building this team. And I think my philosophy to leadership really is like the best leaders are the ones that empower their employees to be independent and to grow. Like the best sign of a good leader is when you see someone on your team advance, grow, get promoted, become more independent. The reality is like as a mother of two and with a lean team, like I can't afford to be micromanaging my team. Like
Mm,
if anything, I'm probably too hands off. But I feel like it's just really important to everyone on the team feels like they really own their lane. And I think that's been the key, I think, to our team cohesion. Like I really do feel like we're this very well-oiled machine. Everyone has a really clear idea of what their role is. There's a lot of cross-functionality and collaboration, but at the end of the day, like everyone's very accountable. and making them feel like they have limitless opportunity within the company is sort of my job, just to keep guiding them. Now, I also have an executive coach that I just started working with a few months ago who's been like amazing for me. Like, I'm able to learn more about my leadership style and perhaps how I could improve it. And she's just a wonderful person to have around on speed dial. So that's been a big change for me personally. Just having someone, who I can bounce ideas off of and like get perspective from. I think it's really important as founders. It's lonely where we are, and like it's really, and I think for me, like my instinct is to you confide a lot in the team, and sometimes it's like you're better to take that information like to someone else who's
Mm.
not like actually on the team. Like I feel like having someone outside that's unbiased, that's like not an employee is a really good person to have in your arsenal. For me, it's all about like lean, empowering people. I'd rather pay everyone well and have their skin in the game. Like most of my team has options in the business, like keeping them really empowered and then not over hiring and only hiring when you
Mm.
really feel like we need to fill like a major hole. And
Yeah.
it's worked well for us so far. But we've just gotten into this new level of scale that I think a lot's going to change in the next year and a half. And that's kind of scary, but also exciting. But,
Yeah.
talk to me in a year. But for now, it's worked well for us.
Yeah. Okay, so then as a human, you touched on this a little bit with the executive coaching, but like as a human who is doing your best to build stability within your life, especially when your business and your brand is, I imagine, a big piece of that. When I think about sustainability, I think not only just environmental sustainability, but sustainability of like humans, the leaders who are the innovators within the industries, and like being able to keep yourself going so that you,
Yeah.
as someone who's kind of driving things forward, is not burning yourself out. Because then, like, if you stop and your team stops and your company stops, then like that's not
Yeah.
helpful to you or anyone around you or any of your purpose and your mission. Like, how are you as a person building stability and like keeping yourself sane and all of those kinds of things?
I've had years where I've been really bad at that and years that I've been good at it. I feel like in the last 2 years, a big unlock has just been really prioritizing like physical health. Like I
Mm.
just make sure that 3 to 4 days a week, I am working out in the morning. I only need half an hour, but I need to do my weightlifting. It's something that's like kept me sane. I think for me, like a lot of founders, I think are wired similarly. Like we're able to like take on a lot of information. We're able to like multitask really well, but it can like really burn you out at a certain point. And I felt for a few years there, like it was not good for me. But then, yeah, through like basic daily habit changes, like the exercising, simple things like making sure that I like have a bath before I go to bed every
Mm.
night and have this like 10 minutes of just pure relaxation, have like little routines that reset me. I also like, I really believe in working smart and not like so
Mm.
hard that I just know what my limit is. I make
Yeah.
sure that I don't work on the weekends. I take time for my family. I take vacation. In fact, every summer, my family has a place out east in New Brunswick, and like we go there. It's like in the middle of nowhere. And I go there for 3 weeks with my family, and I work at a
Nice.
10% capacity. And my
Yeah.
team gets it. They know it's my like annual reset. And I think there's a lot of guilt around doing that kind of stuff. A lot of people
Mm.
feel, especially leaders in senior roles, who are like, I don't want to set an example of like, "Hey, everyone's going to slack off if I do that because like I won't be there." And it's like, no, no, no. Like, I think it sets an example of like, we value our mental health. Like, I don't want my team burning out either because that's the worst thing that can happen is when your team's just pushed to the limit and that affects morale. So, like, and we do things like, team building stuff. We'll like do a spa day. We'll like, we try to do stuff that resets people. And but I need to set an example from the top because oftentimes if the leaders aren't taking that time for themselves and if the leaders aren't saying I'm going on a 2 week vacation or I'm going, to a cottage this weekend, I'm going to leave at we do summer Fridays, like things like that. If they see that you're not, then like they won't do it for themselves or they'll
Mm.
feel guilty if they do it. And like I just don't want to create that feeling at all on the team.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like we all work extremely hard, but we're all very efficient. Like not many of us are working till midnight every night. It's not that kind of thing. Like I really believe in like working smart. So that's something I've done, I guess. Try to
Yeah.
lead by example, but also like really try to prioritize my health too.
Yeah. Well, and clearly it's working. I still go back to you haven't had a single employee quit. in 5 years. And like, especially in today's world, like there's so many opportunities to be able
Yeah.
to like have a loyal team like that. That's really something to truly be proud of.
That's probably like the thing I'm most proud of, honestly, at this point. I'm like, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, like I always say, like you're only as good as your team as the founder. Like you can be the smartest and most amazing visionary, but if you don't have people to help execute your idea and help you be your best self, like you might as well quit well before you start because they're so important. So yeah, I feel really strongly about that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so now kind of turning into the future, where are you going next? Where are you not, what are you not currently doing now that you've got your eye on and you're really excited about when it comes to the future?
That I'm not doing now. Oh, it's so hard to think that way. I feel like right now I see I'm just trying to develop and create that path for Palm to like reach
Mm,
this next level of success. And hopefully someday, I mean, like ultimately the dream might be to sell the business, kind of like work my way towards that, but I'm not in any rush. And I'm really honestly just focused on continuing to scale sustainably. And when I say sustainably, I mean more like financial
yeah,
sustainability,
yeah,
scaling financially sustainably and making the right decisions when it comes to like retail partners and all those things that are so important as you're growing your brand and taking a lot of time and being a little slow about it. Like we're not doing anything impulsively. We have had opportunities to make these huge leaps and in some cases we've said no, we're like we're not there yet and that's okay. So I think for me that's the focus is just continuing to clear that path to that ultimate hopefully exit. But also at the same time it's like I'm really loving what I'm doing and I again I'm not in a rush for that and that's not like what I think about every day when I wake up. What I think about every day
yeah.
is like how is this day going to be better than yesterday,
Mm,
not about like what am I going to do in 5 years. Um, but yeah, I think eventually my future, I'd love to do something else at some point, just if I'm being honest. I
yeah,
don't know what it is, but it might involve, being on a farm and like being around animals. I don't know, like,
yeah,
also with my kids, like spending more time with them. And as they get to like more, I guess, more intensive ages, like right now they're 3 and 5, so or 3 and 6 rather. So, they're kids. They just need to be kind of kept alive and happy. But there
yeah,
will be a time where they're going to need me even more.
yeah.
And I hope that I want to be able to give that to them. So,
Yeah. You know, that's
mm,
so interesting. I was struck by two things that you just talked about. One, kind of this difference between like slow intentional decisions versus like impulsive decisions, which I think is difficult. And I think in our society, we talk a lot about like mindfulness and like living in the moment. And that is often, at least within my experience, difficult to do. But yet, when
mhm.
you really are just focused on, like, okay, tomorrow, we're just gonna try to make tomorrow a little bit better than today, or today a little bit better than tomorrow, like that James
Mhm.
Clear Atomic Habits, just like one thing at a time, in being able to say no to some of those shiny options that might come up,
Yeah.
even though maybe they aren't quite right, is so, I think, important. But I think there's also this other part that I was hearing that I wonder how you feel about kind of the connection between the two, which is also being able to have the creative freedom to be able to do multiple different projects within your lifetime and to have this career in advertising, to work in, was it publishing that you were talking about where at 22 your magazine
That was
folded?
like
Like
way
we
in
could have
the
talked about that for a long time of like what it's like to see a company fold but so early in your career, and then
Yeah.
you were a part of a startup and now you're leading a startup, and then you've got your eye on something else that might be like totally different. And like, do you think that like, whether it's mindful, whether it's being slow or whatever that is, helps you also be able to like go from project to project and have all of these different pieces of your life that fill up different cups?
Yeah, no, I think it is an intentional decision. I think it's driven by a few things. Yeah, so one is, and listen, like we're growing relative pretty fast. It's more just like we could probably grow a lot faster if we like made some of these other decisions, but I don't know
Mm,
if growing faster is necessarily better. Like it's one metric of many, because that can also sacrifice your profitability. It can mean that you're now have to hire, you have to go out and raise money, and that means I have to give up equity in my business, or then I have to hire more people, and that brings in a whole slew of changes when you bring on like 3 or 4 new employees. Like that's like a Pandora's box sometimes. And I feel like we're in this really great moment where we are profitable, we're growing at a really great rate. We have some really great partners that we're able to invest deeply in because we're not spreading ourselves too thin. We're taking our time, especially with our approach to wholesale and retail. Let's launch online first at Ulta. Then let's get one of your products in the grab and go. And then let's build up to a full assortment. Let's start online with Nordstrom. Now we're entering, a bunch of doors this year. It's like everything, but it's taken us a year and a half to get there.
Yeah.
And yeah, out of the gate, we could have pushed. We could have been like, no, we want to be in 700 stores, like out of the gate. And I think like that's the shiny object syndrome. It's like, especially as a founder, you're like chasing that thing, and it's not always the best plan for you. And like, there's a time and a place. I'm just like a big believer in timing. And I think like ever since, because there was a period of time where I was focused, I think, on like fast growth, what's going to get us to the next
Mm.
stage, grow at all costs, and that was like we grew our slowest and we were our least profitable. We like bled money. As soon
Yeah.
as I switched my mindset to like, let's just build a good business where we're making really clear strategic decisions, we're focused on profitability, we can say no, the power of no, and that's where we've actually grown the fastest and been like the healthiest business. So it's funny how that happens, but yeah, I think it also allows me to, yeah, to like keep more ownership of my business, keep my team lean, be really intentional about partners we bring on, be able to invest more deeply in them. Like there's a lot of power in that. Like, a lot of people are like, yeah, Nordstrom's small compared to Ulta or Sephora, but like if you can nurture that relationship, it can be really big, and then you're really ready to get to the next level and you can bring in a mass partner.
Yeah.
It's all just it all happens, and like it's really I find in the cases where brands jump those steps, it can either work out really well if they have lots of capital and they have like, they have
Mhm.
lots of support, and it can work. But in a lot of cases, it can also backfire majorly.
Yeah.
And you can grow too quickly and you can face issues that I would rather not have to face yet. I actually have two really close founder friends of mine who had brands that took a few years to get off the ground, like
Mm.
2 or 3 years of just really like, where's the momentum? Where's the traction? Like just, and they were patient and they continued to make these good decisions and they just continued to believe in what they were doing. And then all of a sudden, there was this like unlock that just happened. And
Yeah.
then it surged them forward. And like it's amazing how at any moment that can be your moment. And you just got to stay resilient and stay, true to your mission. And it's amazing how things can really work out. And slow is not bad. It's just everyone's on their own journey.
Yeah. Okay, so my last and final question that I have
Yes.
for absolutely everyone is who's another business and or leader that you see out there in the world that's doing things the right way? And it could be anyone from someone that you currently work with, an old boss, a mentor, someone that you're a customer of, absolutely anyone that you think deserves a shout out.
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, well, I feel like I kind of answered that when I was talking about my two founder friends in a way.
Yeah.
I think there's not like I feel like no one is doing everything right all the time. Like all these brands from the outside looking in, sure, as a consumer, you're like, look at these amazing brands. Like they're all at Sephora and they're like killing it. And then you hear, but when you're on the other side of it, you know that like they're constantly facing challenges. You hear about like the goods and the bad. And I think like I really don't romanticize things because I just know from personal experience that like no matter where you are, it's kind of a shit show, like at a
Yeah.
certain point. And we all have our own challenges as brands, as founders at all different stages. You're going to have similar challenges, and nothing is perfect despite what we all want you to think by, through our Instagram presences and all of that. So I think like for me, the personal stories that I have of friends who, yeah, like just were in the trenches for years and then suddenly like something hit and now they're like skyrocketing. And seeing those stories are so exciting, but also like so energizing for me because, it just shows that even you can have one of those years and then you can flatline for a year. And like everyone is like on their own journey
Yeah.
and nobody's perfect and everyone's just trying to do their best. And um, I think I have a lot of admiration for like early stage founders who are just like in the thick of it. And yeah, there's no like one in particular, but I feel like just keeping that in mind keeps me going of like everybody is dealing with their own stuff.
Yeah.
And no matter how perfect it looks on the outside, it's not on the inside. And like it's just about grinding through it.
Yeah. I think that's great. Like, shout out to
Okay.
all of the early stage founders out there, including shout out to you and everything that you're doing to like, innovate the
Thanks.
space and push things forward. And I just can't thank you enough for doing this.
My pleasure.
Again, I felt like I was taking so many notes and I just kept thinking like, oh, we could go down that rabbit hole for 2 hours.
Yeah,
Like there's so many things. And I just thank you so much for doing this and for
my
talking
pleasure.
with me.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me and let me know.